I'm a big fan of Sherry and her whole family. My name is Raj Mehta. I'm a therapist, okay? Also known as an addiction killer. And so I've been sober from drugs and alcohol. God willing, on May 15th, it'll be 12 years of sobriety. So 12 years of continuous, uninterrupted sobriety. Not a hit off a joint, no any kind of methadone, no Suboxone, nothing in between. It's the real old-fashioned kind of recovery stuff, right? So that's a little bit about me. I have a difficult job. I have to go into schools and colleges and make presentations and tell kids that drugs and alcohol are bad and recovery is good. So imagine that job, going into the school, you got an hour with the kid, and he's in high school, and he's been watching all kinds of hip-hop, right? He's gone down the wormhole on the internet where marijuana cures every single ailment known to man. You guys know that, right? And marijuana's got no problems at all whatsoever, but he can't go to school, he can't make his bed, and he has no friends. So what I'm saying is that right now, the way the world is working, it's kind of working against us. And so my job is very difficult. So what I've done is I've actually trademarked these drug-free fists. Not to make money, but to help people. The idea behind this drug-free fist, imagine if I gave you a t-shirt or a pillow that says, "I can't get high, my mom is watching me." Would you want to wear that? No, you wouldn't want to wear that, right? So I got to make this cool, right? Even on collaborations, look at this. This is my new one. Got Fortune Favors the Bold on it, and we got Supreme on the back. Little collaboration there, right? Aren't you doing pretty good? That's what I've heard. So, I have a very difficult job, right? Also got a hat, right? Imagine this. I have some of my clients wearing this to school, to high school, by the way. Imagine that in high school, the Supreme hat, drug-free fists, Fortune Favors the Bold. Remember, this is a hard job to market this kind of stuff, and to promote sobriety is very, very difficult. So we're going to talk about addiction, and what's really important to me is the idea behind addiction being a disease. You know, I'm a compromising kind of guy, but we can't talk about two things today. We're not going to talk about the earth being flat. We're not going to do that, okay? And addiction is a disease. It's not negotiable. You can say it's a choice and a disease. You cannot say it's not a disease. I'll tell you why. Imagine if I come to you and I say I can't work today. I have the flu. You're my boss. You look at me right in the face. What are you going to look for to see if I'm telling you the truth or not as far as symptoms of the flu? Sniffles, right? Coughing, wheezing. We got physical symptoms that tell you I have the flu, I'm telling you the truth. So what about addiction? Imagine a person comes to say, I can't work today, I have addiction. Give me a physical symptom of addiction, because they're out there. Shaking, right? Maybe don't look so good, don't dress so good. If you've fallen on hard times, maybe you can be homeless for a bunch of reasons, but for some people, they're homeless because of addiction, right? So they don't dress so good, they don't smell so good, right? They don't act so good, right? And see the decay in the individual, right? What about mental signs of addiction? What's different about a person in full-blown addiction mentally than a person who's non-addicted?
They're absent focus.
Yeah. It's having a zombie boyfriend or a zombie husband. They're physically there, but they're emotionally unavailable. That sound familiar? And so they have an obsession with the drug, right? If you got a pocket full of heroin and you're a heroin addict, what are you thinking about? Where do I get more heroin, right? If you're an alcoholic and you're on Skid Row, you got a bottle in your hand, what are you thinking about? Where do I get more alcohol? And if you're obsessed with something, it's going to cause you anxiety, right? And if you have anxiety and it's untreated, you're going to have depression. So a person with addiction probably has a bunch of anxiety, depression going on, right? An obsession with the drug. And how does it feel when you take a drug when you don't want to? How does it affect your self-esteem? Because some people want to stop, and they're telling me, I want to stop taking this drug. But the body says, you don't have a choice today. So how does it affect somebody's self-esteem and self-confidence when they wake up in the morning and they're told by the drug of choice, this is what you're going to do today? Does that make you feel good about yourself? So a person with an addiction's got lower self-esteem and lower self-confidence. What about socially? How does being an alcoholic or an addict affect a person socially, relationships, family, and friends? Are they happy with the person when they're using? No, but why? Is the person reliable? Are they responsible in active addiction? Do they might even behave inappropriately or even steal your money, right? So we see people that begin addiction begin to lose their friends and have new friend groups, right? What about legal symptoms of addiction? How about law enforcement? Why are the police so interested in alcoholics and addicts? I'm asking.
These are criminals.
Yeah, because they're criminals, right? The criminal lens of addiction. These are criminals. They must be arrested. They have bad moral character, right? So if you're an alcoholic or an addict, you're probably drinking and driving if you're an alcoholic, right? If you're buying drugs, that's illegal. If you're selling drugs, that's illegal. And so, of course, you probably have some law enforcement contacts. So you probably got MIPs, DUIs, possession charges, right? So we got legal symptoms of addiction. What about financially? If you're in full-blown addiction, how are your finances going to be? Not so good, right? Why is that? The high cost of low living? Sound familiar? Right? I got $100 in my pocket and I got a cell phone bill to pay, or I got some heroin to buy, and I'm in full-blown addiction. Where's that money going to go? Is that weird? I'm an alcoholic and I got a bar tab to pay or my kid's soccer team sponsorship to pay. What am I going to do? You pay the bar tab, right? Because you got to go back there and get more alcohol. So we see when people have addiction, they change their priorities. And their drug of choice and their alcohol becomes most important. Where a person spends their money tells you a lot about that person. Can we agree on that? Where you put your money says a lot about you, and also your time. So what about addiction over a period of time? How's it going to affect somebody spiritually? If you begin to use drugs and alcohol over a period of time, how's it going to affect your morals and values over time? Can we turn a good guy into a bank robber and a good girl into a prostitute over time with addiction and vice versa? Can't that happen? So the flu is really easy to treat. It only has physical symptoms. Addiction is very, very difficult to treat. It's got physical, mental, social, financial, and even spiritual symptoms all going on simultaneously. But the main symptom of addiction is the inability to get high successfully. It's not a challenge, don't think it's challenging me. No, I'm not challenging anybody here. What I'm saying is that when addicts get high, they tend to have consequences from their using. Is that making sense? Those consequences can be in all those different symptom areas. Law enforcement contact, crying moms, no job, no money, bad physical health, bad liver. So when a person has an addiction going on, they have also the 4 Ds. Anybody ever hear of denial before? So what about denial and addiction? Why does denial and addiction go hand in hand? Well, let's talk about that. If I come to see you and you're a therapist and I say I have a gambling problem and you're a really good therapist, what are you going to say back to me? You need to get help and stop gambling, right? If I come to see you and I say I have a drug problem and you're a really good therapist, what are you going to say? You need to get help and stop taking drugs. If I don't want to stop taking drugs, I must never ever tell you I have a drug problem, right? I must be unlucky, misfortunate, a whole bunch of different things. So denial is the first defense mechanism in addiction. It's an acronym, means don't even know I'm a liar. So parents say oftentimes, I caught my son shooting up, but he says he's not doing it every day. He's not an addict. It's like, all right. But even the parents can be in denial. A mom found, from West Bloomfield mom, she found a spoon and a syringe in her son's room. And her son said the spoon was for yogurt and the syringe wasn't his. So she confronted him. And I said, check it and see if he has any track marks. And he did. He showed his mom his track marks. He said, Mom, I donate plasma to help poor people. She called me back on the phone and said, Raj, I'm so happy. My son is not an addict. He's just donating plasma. I'm like, wow, how do you even think that's true? Right? Because for some parents, it's so uncomfortable saying my son is an alcoholic or an addict, they'd rather have them be a very, dedicated plasma donator, right? Which sounds a lot prettier to your colleagues and friends at work. How come your son looks so emaciated? He's giving so much plasma away. He's a saint. No, he's not giving plasma away. So we have denial, right? Another D that I really don't like is going to be called distraction. When I do an intervention on somebody, right, the first thing they say, I don't have a drug problem. You go through that for about an hour. Then they say, my dad's doing this. My mom's doing that. My brother's smoking pot every single day. Look over here, look over there. I have PTSD. You probably do. You know, I have mental health issues. Well, you probably do, but that doesn't mean we can't work on your addiction. So the other D is to distract from what's going on. The first one is deny there's a problem. Then we have to distract from the problem. Point to the family, point to the president, point to somebody that we can say, this is the problem, not me. And that's not much fun to deal with, right? Another D we deal with is obviously talking about delay. Well, you know, I realize I do have a drug problem and I have a mental health issue, but I can't get help right now. I have to feed my goldfish. It's like, okay, I got to water my plant. I got to break up with my girlfriend. It's my favorite one. I can't go to rehab today. I had to break up with my girlfriend. And I go, this is really easy because, you know, you just go on Facebook and change your status and it's all done. No, I'm not like that. I do things face to face, right? Where is she at? I don't know. We have to find her. No, we're not going to look around, driving around, find your girlfriend. We're going to go to rehab today. So we have a lot of distraction going on, right? The other one we talk about, the one I hate the most, is divide. The final D in addiction is it divides families up. It makes moms and dads fight. You're pushing him too hard. You should leave him alone. He doesn't need to go to rehab. He needs a new girlfriend. And this dividing gets even worse when people die. Because when people die of overdoses, what I really hate about the most is oftentimes the moms and dads will not stay together. It's almost like addiction gives that final dig. It steals your son or your daughter and they die, and then it even does the final thing where it breaks the family up and there's a divorce. And I hate that. So addiction divides up families. When people have full-blown addiction, they operate from denial, distraction, and delaying and dividing. And those are all techniques to prevent them from being identified and also prevent them from taking responsibility for their behavior. There's an argument about addiction, is it a choice or a disease, okay? And so you can say it's both. You can choose to use drugs and become an addict. But remember, people that have true addiction, their brains don't scan normal. Their brains scan differently, right? And by the way, if you are a heroin addict, how do you choose to vomit and go through withdrawals? If you're an alcoholic, how do you choose to have a seizure when you stop drinking? You're doing the right thing, you're not drinking, and addiction goes, we're going to give you a seizure for your good behavior. All right, don't get me started on Xanax. Worked at Brighton Hospital for 4 years. And so our biggest fear is people come in on Xanax because you stop taking Xanax and you're doing great, and 4 weeks later you have a seizure. Yeah, ask Macomb County Jail about that shit. How people die in their jail, not taking care of them. Some of them are my clients going back and forth from jail for seizures, not being medicated properly. Isn't that amazing? So addiction is a disease because it's got symptoms and it's treatable. But you can choose to eat too many donuts and get diabetes, but diabetes is a disease. You can't have it both ways. And here's why it matters. One of my clients came to see me, she's a very wealthy Chaldean woman, right? And her son had overdosed 2 times 2 months before. And so he wouldn't come to my office because he was very scared of me. I don't know why. So mom comes to my office and says to me, my son has stolen all our jewelry. Like, you know, $100,000 worth of jewelry are gone. He's stolen it. So it's my rare time where I say, Mom, you've got to get your son arrested as soon as possible. He's already overdosed 2 times before. He's got way too much money and way too much access to drugs. He can possibly die. She goes, what do you want me to do? I said, we have to get him arrested, taken to jail, and then we have him transferred to jail to rehab. She goes, a rehab full of drug addicts? And I'm like, yeah. She goes, you want me to shame our family and take our only son and put him in a facility full of drug addicts from the streets? I go, Mom, your son has track marks all over his arm. He's overdosed 2 times. Your son is an addict. She goes, no, he's not. He's going through a heroin phase. I'm like, what? Dyeing your hair pink and listening to weird music when you're a teenager, that's called a phase. Shooting heroin ain't no phase. And so she refused to get her son any help because it was more important for her to maintain the dignity of the family and this big ego. And once again, I don't like being right. I like being happy. Being right is overrated and being happy is underrated. A month later, guess what? He's dead. Now I got to spend an hour with her, and I can't confront her because it's not value added. I can't say, well, I told you so. But here's why it matters. If you don't believe addiction is a disease, you're probably not going to get help. And studies show that people don't believe it's a disease, don't get help, feel lots of shame, right? And believe it's a moral issue when it's not. They did a study on people that shoot heroin, that are heroin addicts, to see what happens when they stop using drugs. Because remember, they're criminals, right? So guess what happens when a person who's shooting heroin stops using drugs for 1 year? 80% of them commit how much crime? Zero. Which means that 80% of the people that are addicts are not criminal. I use my fast little test on my DUI people and my possession people. They come into my office, I go, I want to figure out if you're a criminal or not. It's kind of a weird thing. I go, just roll with me on this. Okay, if you're not using drugs or alcohol, what are the odds of you being arrested? And I go, like 0. Guess what? You're not a criminal. Because if you're a criminal, you'd say, even when I'm not drinking and getting high, I'll break your nose and steal your stuff. Like, oh yeah. I got some clients that are members of the motorcycle clubs. And they'll tell me, even when I'm not using drugs or alcohol, this is what we do. One of my clients came in my office and he has a vowel on his last name. And he goes, all my documentation's got OC on it. I go, what do you mean all your documentation has OC on it? And he goes, organized crime. He goes, so-and-so is my dad. I'm like, oh, I read about your dad in the paper. He's like, yeah. See, he's not the one we're talking about because he's really a criminal, right? But 80% are not. And if you don't like crime, what's a good way to end it to get it to stop? By helping people with a drug problem. Is that making sense? So we go to the C's. When people use drugs and alcohol and have a problem with it, they have cravings to use. Anybody that's ever used drugs ever have a craving? Yeah. How much fun is that?
0.
Right? So people have cravings to eat chocolate, right? Yeah, right. But this kind of craving is not a chocolate craving, okay? I want you to imagine if you're in a desert and you got nothing to drink for 2 days, how you'd feel with regards to thirst. How thirsty you would be, right? Imagine someone walks up to you and said, I got a bottle of water, but you can't have it because it's ruining your life. That's what a craving for alcohol or heroin or cocaine feels like. It's a visceral primal reaction. It's down to the hunger and fear and thirst part of your survival brain, the reptile brain, that says we'll do whatever we need to do to get more of this stuff. And that's where that dangerous, recklessness and ruthlessness comes in because we have a reptile brain kicking in, right? So we have cravings to use when we have an addiction going on, right? But people who have a problem with drugs and alcohol always go through a phase of trying to control it. So the goal is, if you're a college freshman, don't want to be an alcoholic, right? So the rules to the game are what as a college freshman? Only drink on Friday and Saturday, right? Now, after you go to college and you've been there for a couple of weeks, Thursday is kind of like a Friday on college campuses. So now you can drink on Thursday and Friday and Saturday. And now your buddies tell you, you know what, Sunday's on a work day, but it's kind of the weekend. So now we got Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday going on, right? And you see where this goes, right? The addiction, more days than not, all of a sudden we're drinking every single day. And how we get there? Because we had original plan to control. Other plans with alcohol, don't drink before 5 o'clock. That sound familiar? Because alcoholics drink before 5 o'clock. Only gentlemen drink after 5 o'clock. Civilized people, right? Don't wake and bake, marijuana, right? Don't wake and bake. Sign of being a marijuana abuser, right? So all this control goes on. Control even with people. It's the bad girlfriend, it's the bad boyfriend, it's the bad neighborhood, right? So we try to control all those things. Even moms begin to control. You will not see that girl. You will not see that boy. Right? So we have cravings to use, trying to control. But the worst part about it is the consequences. Because when people have a drug or alcohol problem, once again, they can't get high successfully, and their moms cry, and their girlfriends cry, and their boyfriends cry, and their children cry because they can't be there for them. They're physically there, but they're emotionally unavailable. That damages the whole family. So the idea behind a disease is very important. And we covered the 4 Ds, and we also covered the 4 Cs, consequences and cravings and control. Now we're going to talk about, imagine if you came to see me and I'm a really good oncologist. I'm a really good cancer doctor, right? And we're going to spend a whole bunch of time together. I'm going to say, you have this illness. There's no name for it. It's like really bad. It's chronic, progressive, and fatal, and have a great day. How would you feel? Not so good, right? Not so good. You're a really bad doctor, right? So a good doctor will say, 2 hours together, you have cancer. Here's how you got it. Here's the reason behind your DNA, your environmental stressors, right? The combination together, nature and nurture. And here's how you got it. And there's a word for it. It's called the disease of addiction, or it's the disease of whatever. Having a word for something gives you power over it. When you have addiction going on, having the label of addiction gives you power over it. But most importantly, knowing how you got it is really good. Don't get me wrong, because knowing how you got something will lower your anxiety. Not knowing unknowns cause anxiety. So when people come to see me, we talk about addiction, we talk about their family, talk about who they hang out with. And oftentimes they're predisposed for this. Remember, we have choice. Obviously, you choose what goes into your body. But if I keep coughing on you and say don't catch a cold, does that really feel like a choice? Right? When an airplane crashes to the ground, when a person develops heroin addiction, or when a person overdoses and dies, when everyone gets really, really honest with themselves, there's a whole bunch of blame to go around for that. That didn't happen on accident. I didn't make heroin. I didn't invent it. It's been around for a long time. When I was using heroin, it was 7% pure. It was dirt heroin. It was horrible. There was a lot of stigma. People from the inner city, people of color, were viewed from the criminal lens. These are all criminals. And all of a sudden, you can thank Purdue Pharma for this, overprescribing of Oxycontin and Vicodin. And now we had people that were gifted athletes and gifted people with scholarships in college being overprescribed opioids. And all of a sudden, the opioids were hard to get a hold of. Doctors cut them off. And on the streets, it costs a lot more. And someone says, I know someone that has heroin. Now we have all these suburban kids driving down to get their heroin. All of a sudden, the faces of the overdoses began to change. They became these white faces from suburbia. And the moms got really, really angry about that. But still, nobody listened. It's important. Still, nobody listened. The moms got really, really angry about that, and still nobody listened. Because they were fine with it, because as long as you had that stigma, they weren't going to stand up. But then we had people that began things like FAN and Brian's Hope and all these organizations that said, we are sick and tired of being sick and tired. Our kids can't die in vain. This has to stop. And we're going to point out why this is, because Purdue Pharma, even in their own internal email, said, our legal angle to prevent lawsuits is to always identify the person that overdosed or died or was an addict as a person of bad moral character and prone to criminality. Never forget that. So what happens is we have the faces of addiction begin to change. And so we have people bringing in fentanyl. You guys know about fentanyl, right? And El Chapo is truly a piece of shit. I'll tell you why. Because he never had to do that. He just decided, I'm a billionaire drug dealer and I want to be richer. Like, what? I'm a billionaire drug dealer and I want to be richer. These Chinese people over here make really good research chemicals. I can get these chemicals really cheap and make fentanyl. I cut the heroin with the fentanyl, and yeah, we're going to lose some people. They're going to die. I'll make even more money. Like, wow, really? Real thing, right? And so the Sinaloa drug cartel is the biggest cartel as far as I thank them for all the drugs that are in America right now. And the analysis of the cartel, they have at least 40,000 employees worldwide. Tell me that's not impressive. 40,000 employees that just work for the Sinaloa drug cartel in Mexico and out throughout the world. How many of them have friends and relatives and law enforcement and immigration and border crossing guards and jail guards? You guys know that, right? El Chapo was in a Mexican prison. I can't make this stuff up. He was in a maximum security Mexican prison. And he said, I'm El Chapo and I don't want to be here. I'm a billionaire. Like, what do you want us to do? I want you to build me a tunnel a mile long under my cell, up in the shower, and I'm not walking out of here. I want a motor scooter. And I'm like, bet. And they did that. That's like James Bond stuff. Nobody does that. Imagine what kind of resources you must have to get yourself a tunnel built. That was his second prison escape. Now he's in an American prison. I'd probably give him to Supermax. He'll never get out of there. But the point is that when he was arrested, remember, he's the fentanyl king. That's why I hate him. When he was arrested and prosecuted, his accountant turned state's evidence. You guys interested in what the accountant had to say about El Chapo's finances? So what would impress you as far as a bribe to one single person in Mexico? Throw me a number that say, that's a pretty good bribe. Throw me a number out. Million's pretty good, right? How about 10 million? Is that pretty good? If I say I got $10 million and I'm going to bring some heroin through, look the other way, you'd be like, all right, I'll think about that. He bribed the Mexican president, who denies this, $120 million. Is that pretty good? So when you wonder, how come there's so much fentanyl and heroin in America, you can thank the amount of money that he has, right? He's a billionaire. They had the biggest methamphetamine bust in American history in California. They found $1 billion worth of methamphetamine. It's a good bust, right? Can we agree on that? It's retail, not wholesale, but retail $1 billion bust. What happened to the price of methamphetamine in America a month later? Nothing. Wow, nothing. You guys impressed? Please say you're impressed with that, right? You can lose $1 billion load and not even blink, right? Next point. So, extrapolation from that, people analyze this drug stuff and say, what do you want to do about the drug stuff? How do you want it to stop, right? And they say, well, the DEA keeps telling you we want to arrest everybody that's selling it. First they want to arrest somebody who uses it. Now they're kind of laying back on that, right? We're going to arrest all people that are selling drugs in America. That was their DEA thing. Since 1972, the DEA began under Nixon, right? And so adjusted for inflation, what are the prices of wholesale methamphetamine, heroin, and cocaine since 72? Has it gone up or gone down? Gone down. Wow. And they spent billions and billions of dollars locking people up, arresting people, taking their property, all that kind of stuff. So how do I become the bad guy when I say to do a DEA presentation, done this twice, they get done talking, they even say now, they never said before, we can't arrest our way out of a drug problem. I'm like, wow, you said it out loud. You can't arrest your way out of a drug problem. Then I say, hi, everybody. There's no money for addiction treatment. They're like, yeah, there's no money. We can't raise taxes, right? And I was like, no, we can't do that. So should people that sell drugs be responsible to heal the community when they've been caught, right? They should be responsible to make the community whole, right? So why is it that when they get busted, all their money and assets go back to the DEA and law enforcement? Why can't just half that money go to treatment and helping people? And law enforcement looks at me like, don't you say that out loud. Don't you do that. Don't you do that. We're having a lot of fun, overtime, all kinds of stuff. Don't do that, right? But why is that a bad idea? Money's there. They just want to keep it in their pocket. They keep arresting the people that bring it in, right? So people analyze drug dealing and cartels. Imagine if someone that believes in the ideology of ISIS. So they believe in that craziness, right? And so if they have no money, will they still fight? They will. People that believe back in World War II, you say, Mr. Nazi soldier, we're doing pretty bad. We can't pay you right now for this month. You say, I quit? No. When you have an ideology, doesn't matter if you have money or not, you keep fighting, right? But see, the cartels don't have an ideology. All those 40,000 people that work for El Chapo don't do it because they believe some kind of drug god they need to worship to bring drugs to Americans. No, they do it for the money. So analysis shows the best way to stop the cartels is not to chase their dope, but chase their money and the ones that launder the money for them. Because if you target that, you will ruin the cartels. Because when El Chapo has no money, no one's going to fight for him. No one's going to dig him a tunnel. But they don't want to do that. I'll prove a point. You guys know about HSBC Bank? Very famous bank, worldwide bank, called HSBC Bank. Well, in 2012, they got caught with their fingers in the cookie jar. In 2012, they got busted laundering money. So as Americans, we have some enemies. You guys know that, right, around the world? And so they got caught laundering money for the Sinaloa drug cartel. $700 million for the cartel. They even had in Tijuana a teller who had a really wide booth for the cartel to throw their money through in duffel bags. And I'm making this up, okay? But don't we have an enemy that's kind of even worse than the cartel in a way? You guys ever hear about 9/11 buildings that got knocked down, kind of thing, Al-Qaeda? You've heard of Al-Qaeda, right? And so those buildings got knocked down by Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. HSBC Bank went into court, federal court, and said, yeah, you guys kind of caught us with the fingers in the cookie jar here. They're like, what'd you boys do? So here's the thing, like, don't say so much about we laundered money for like El Chapo and those boys. And they're like, you did that? We laundered money for Iran too? Like, no, and we laundered money for Al-Qaeda. What do you think about this? The two tiers of justice. If me and Justin get caught with a pack of dope, we're facing 2 years in prison. You get cuffed up, taken away in front of our friends and family, right? HSBC Bank told the U.S. Justice Department, that said, here's how it's going to go down. There's not going to be any perp walk, like none. No one's getting cuffed up, no one's going to walk into court, and no one goes to jail. They're like, really? We're going to give you $1.98 billion and say that we're really sorry? We're all going to be cool. And guess what happened? That's what they did. They paid $1.98 billion to say we're very sorry for laundering money for the cartels and for Al-Qaeda, and we promise we won't do it again. And what was their profit? I got this from the internet. Guess how much profit HSBC Bank made in 2018? $20 billion. If I take some cartel money and move it around and I get caught personally, I go to prison for a very, very long time. If I wear a shirt and tie and stand behind a bank, I can do whatever I want. And by the way, who did more damage in the community? Me and Justin? Or the guy laundered billions of dollars for El Chapo? Who's more responsible for damaging the community? And why do we have two ways of viewing justice? How come there's not even a perp walk, not even a weekend in jail? By the way, they got caught again in 2016. This time they went to the U.S. Department of Justice and said, I'm not making this up, we don't want to be any further investigated because we're too big to fail. And if you damage us and our shareholders, it's going to affect the U.S. economy. And the Department of Justice said, you know what? We'll walk on this one. And no more prosecutions. So when you wonder, why is America filled with drugs? Don't point at me. Don't point at other people. Remember that the bankers and the money launderers are most responsible for this stuff because they make a fortune off this and never pay any risk or liability. They have no exposure. And so until we target them, this is all just a waste of time. It has no impact on the overall prices. And the other way to actually help is to help the people that are on drugs get off of drugs. We can't stop it on the sales side. We can't stop on the demand side. Having less people want to actually have drugs and alcohol, less demand. Is that making sense? So I covered the 4 C's. I covered push and pull factors. We're going to talk about the final thing today. We talked about what is addiction. We got that down. Now we're talking about how to help somebody. Why do people stop using drugs or alcohol?
Because their life sucks.
Right. And that means consequences, right? No one comes into a rehab center on a winning streak, right? So consequences motivate people. AA and NA, we got people actually will kind of rewrite their history. I don't like that at all. Don't rewrite your history. I got sober because I woke up one day and I thought to myself, drugs and alcohol aren't my friend. I'm going to turn things around. No. That's not how it happened. Your liver was failing you. Your boss was about to fire you, right? Law enforcement had you on a DUI charge. It was all about consequences. So in the beginning, we want to give people consequences for their using. It's called tough love. And it can be all kinds of consequences. It can just be the fact that we're going to kind of not put this under the rug and keep dealing with it. So people are motivated to change by consequences, initially, especially with drugs and alcohol and gambling problems too. What about later on, though? The person's completed all their stuff for court. They're still going to AA and NA. They have no more legal reason to do that. You ask them, like, why do you keep going to those meetings? You don't have anybody telling you you have to do it. Your mom's really happy. Your wife's really happy. He says, you know why I'm staying sober now? Because of the rewards. Like, what do you mean? I have higher self-esteem. I have higher self-confidence. I'm making more money. I have better relationships. Oh, rewards, right? Those are good. Consequences and rewards. But you know what? Those are external motivators. I can prove a point. I can put a gun to somebody's head and say, if I catch you using heroin, I'm going to blow your head off. If I'm completely gangster on that, they might stop using heroin for 7 days, right? I can say, I'm going to give you $1 million a day to not use alcohol. And you probably do it for a couple of days, maybe even 5 or 20. But those are external motivators. They're not great, they're good. The best motivator of all is values, okay? My close friend Jerry died of a drug overdose, okay? When he died, his wife Kimmy called me on the phone. I knew Jerry was using, and I was not that shocked, but I was still very sad and disappointed. So I tell Kimmy, I go, Kimmy, I'm so sorry that Jerry overdosed and died. And she goes, Raj, the story gets worse. I go, what do you mean it gets worse? She goes, I'm pregnant and I'm doing heroin. I'm like, no. Jerry lied to me. He told me that he wasn't doing heroin with his wife. So I said, Kimmy, I'll be there in 40 minutes and pick you up, take you to your first NA meeting. And I did. We went through a lot of tissues, a lot of Kleenexes, and we cried together. And it was really, really hard. The baby was born really healthy. And so I went to St. Anastasia's Church in Troy for the Godfather ceremony. And I'm up there, Kimmy's still wearing her wedding band. And the priest grabs the baby, looks at me, he goes, who are you? I go, I'm the Godfather. Looks at Kimmy, goes, where's the father at? She says, he can't be here today. So he'd know the background story. He begins saying, I can't understand why the father of this little baby can't be here on the most important day of this Christian child's life. And Kimmy just begins to lose it. She sobs uncontrollably and says, because he died of a heroin addict. And I had what's called an epiphany in that moment. I was so angry I wanted to kill somebody. I wanted to choke somebody out. And my epiphany was, addiction killed your friend and made his kid basically an orphan. Now what are you going to do about it? And it became very personal to me. So I said I'm going to go to graduate school, become a therapist, and actually fight addiction and become an addiction killer. And so my mom passed away 2 years ago of cancer. Okay, and she was in hospice, right? And so when Jerry passed away, he talked about, like, why do I not get high? Like I said, God willing, on May 15th, it'll be 12 years clean and sober. It's not about rewards. Those are nice. Not about consequences, but kind of fearless. It's about values. The same reason that a normal person doesn't harm a puppy is why I don't get high, because it's wrong. It's deep. It's one more time. The same reason why a person doesn't harm a puppy is the same reason I don't get high, because it's wrong to me. It doesn't require a course in college. You're supposed to have a moral compass. You've been sober for long enough and seen what drugs and alcohol do to people. Your awareness should change. You should be woke. You say, you know what? This is not right. And if there are demons and angels, I'm not saying that there are, but if there are demons and angels, where does addiction fall? Quite the demon, right? Ruining people's lives, killing families, right? Year after year, the same thing going on, and a slow death, not a fast one. Your hitman or assassin, it's 2 in the head, walks away, right? Addiction gives you that slow death, the slow misery. So people that stay sober for longer periods of time have identified sobriety as part of their value system. This is who I am. This is what I stand for. I don't use drugs or alcohol because that's who I am. That's my moral compass. So I want to thank you guys for your time and listening to me. I hope we covered some good information. And it's my honor to be here, and my honor to be of service to you guys. Thank you.